The year is 2005. Doctor Who has returned to our screens.
Are you my mummy? If you could concentrate.
The likes of YouTube and Google Maps are launched for the first time, and when I wasn't pouring hours of my after-school days into playing Hogs of War, I was instead playing Heroes of the Pacific. I remember the moment I opened the present from my auntie that contained this game for PS2, looking at it thinking,
what the hell is this? Why is there a plane on the front? Is it on fire? What the hell is going on?
Developed by the then Melbourne development company That Game and published by the likes of Ubisoft and the powerhouse of
Codemasters.
Heroes of the Pacific would release in September of that year for PS2, Xbox and PC. This game is defined as an aerial combat simulator game that is set during the Pacific theatre of World War II, and so today I want to take to the skies once again and show you all why this game is an absolute masterpiece. It changed my life and interests for the better, and from a game design standpoint it still holds several amazing details that could be so easily overlooked, but that are ultimately the main reasons why I keep coming back to play this game. So I guess there's nothing else left to do but to keep hitting that boat until it rolls over and dies.
My name's William Crow. I'm a pilot in the U.S. Navy. My dad used to be a pilot in the United States Air Force, so growing up we moved around a lot.
We start our Air Force service in the campaign mode, one that offers to take us through near enough the entirety of the American Pacific campaign, starting with Pearl Harbor and ending with Iwo Jima. Introduced to our main character, Lieutenant William Crow, voiced by Steve Salisbury, we move from place to place, island to island across the Pacific, from Wake Island, the Marshall Islands, the Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, Gilbert Islands, the Marianas, and the Philippines. Right from the get-go, the presentation of the game's front end drops you right into the thick of 1940s propaganda, with every option and image just oozing with the fonts, messages and themes of the time, with the entirety being that of a pro-American resolve. The game's story boils down to one single mindset, that of revenge. Crow's brother goes down on the USS Arizona, one of the many battleships hit during the Japanese raids on Pearl Harbor, forcing the powerful line,
"You don't sucker punch the United States and get away with it."
This turmoil for revenge sees beef between Crow and the Japanese 13th Squadron, who he meets members of throughout the campaign and must eliminate before the final fight against their leader, Shunagawa, at Iwo Jima. Of course, a shit ton of other stuff occurs before then, including the rescuing of POWs.
Is that the new Corsair? Nice.
No.
One of those POWs becoming one of the lads. Things taking a bit of a sus turn when suddenly everyone thinks that POW is a rat after the squad gets ambushed right after he has to turn back because of a dodgy plane.
Sweet mother of God, it's an ambush!
Causing that POW to be locked up, who then breaks out, nicks a plane, and actually goes on to save Crow from the 13th Squadron at a vital point in the story.
It's a pity the rest of your squadron isn't here to share your fate. Still, it is only a matter of time before they join you. I wouldn't count on that, Tojo.
Tom, you crazy son of a bitch. Aren't you grounded?
I stole a plane and took off when I heard you were in trouble. I couldn't stay home and let you hog all the fun. I'll draw them off. You head for the carrier. After him, men. Crow isn't going anywhere fast. We'll come back after we get his friend.
Goddamn. In short, Tom Stewart is a true American hero. Rest in peace, King. But I'm not sure why all 5 enemy planes, including the ace Ibuki Ishihiro, all had to go after Tom. Like, not one of them could have stayed with Crow? No? Okay.
This time, I believe that we will have the last word. The last you will ever hear.
With each new mission comes a new way to fly and a new enemy to kill. The mission briefing is read by the wonderfully buttery smooth voice of Christopher Kirby, who, well, I tell ya, could read me a bedtime story any day of the goddamn week.
We need your wing to get out there and target the Japanese carriers. Each flat top you send to the bottom takes 100 enemy planes off our backs. Lieutenant Commander Callahan will assign wings where they will do the most good. Good luck, Lieutenant. Our prayers go with you.
So before we've even gotten into the game itself, we are already soaked in this pool of immersion that is continuing to push us into starting that next mission, but not before we've chosen ourselves a difficulty setting. Heroes of the Pacific offers up 4 difficulty modes: Rookie, Pilot, Veteran, and Ace. As you'd expect, with each difficulty comes an increase in enemy strength and player handicaps, as with each increase in difficulty comes a reduction in firepower time. For example, playing on Rookie and shooting primary fire, you'll notice that you can quite easily spam your machine guns for lengthy periods of time before they get too hot, so on the likes of Veteran and Ace, you can expect much more of this. It all requires you to take on a heavier focus with accuracy, and not taking the spray and pray method that a lot of overconfident rookies have taken over the years. One of the primary reasons why I would argue Heroes of the Pacific is still quite easily one of the best dogfighting games today, even by modern standards, is because of that single word, variety. The game does everything in its power to vary the things that you see and do to great effect, so much so that I continue to play this game consistently to this very day, 20 years later. Let's start with an easy one, the missions. While it's true that a good chunk of your time within any given mission is going to involve you following 3 states of flying to the objective, destroying or viewing the objective for recon purposes, and then flying back to where you first started in order to exit the level, it must be said that the variation used to fill in those blanks is pretty impressive. All plethora of plane types will be utilized, in some cases locked to specific missions, but that adds to the charm of Heroes. I'm sure many fans watching this video would agree that despite their difficulties with them at the time, the missions where that lock structure is used ends up being the most iconic. You know the one I'm referring to, don't you?
No problem, Hornet. Let me just ease this big mama off the water.
The missions involving the PBY Catalina are the pinnacle of this mission structure, especially when you add in the fact that their primary objective is actually reconnaissance. You'll ease that big mama off the water, make your way to the objective, hover near the objective while the camera takes a million goddamn years to take the freaking photo while 50 million peaks and zeros swarm in on your position to melt you faster than Admiral Yamamoto's plane did over a ball. It gets a little stressful. But it's that game of cat and mouse between you and the squadrons of enemy fighters that make it so addictive. I could list off and talk in depth about every single mission and how good they are, but then we'd be here for hours. So to mention just a few, Midway Patrol, as we just mentioned.
Yeah, suck on that,
Tokyo Express.
This is the HMAS Canberra to the unidentified plane to our south. Identify yourself right now or we'll plug you one.
Backs Against the Wall is the first time you come up against kamikazes, which when you don't have that much speed in the early game, can produce some pretty frantic plays.
Pilot, get your ass over here now!
I'm gonna be butt ass naked so the women just be hitting my balls and shit. Hey bro, watch your jet. Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet! Turn your ass what's off. Turn your ass what's off.
Recon. It's iconic, but seriously, fuck this mission.
I'm glad I'm not on a boat right now.
Rescue Usurper.
Thanks for the lift home, Lieutenant Crow. You really saved my bacon today.
Steel Prototype Jet.
That jet isn't your grandpa's biplane. Fly like a man, why don't you?
The Musashi. End of the Kido Butai is a fun one, made even more epic by the seemingly random one-on-one duel you end up having with the Nishizawa Ace. That sequence alone is pretty dope.
Oni bacon, man. 天皇陛下と気高い西沢藩のご先祖様の名において挑戦してやる。
Kamikaze Inbound provides a crazy start to the Iwo Jima campaign, not to mention the iconic
General quarters, all hands, man your battle stations, incoming air raid. Hell, Kamikaze! They took out the Bismarck Sea!
and finally raising the flag for that epic showdown between Crow and Shunagawa.
No! How did he beat me?
Dad, Charlie, I got him. I got the bastard.
These are what I see as being the most iconic missions in Heroes of the Pacific, but that doesn't exactly make them my favourite by any means. What they do highlight though is that feeling of variety once again, as through all 26 missions, you'll be tasked upon to attack all manner of planes, battleships, ranging from super battleships, heavy and light cruisers and destroyers, to submarines, mini-subs, troop transport amphibious vehicles, ships and PT boats, as well as a multitude of ground targets that include planes, hangars, military installations, tanks, jeeps, pillboxes, flak and machine gun nests, and my personal favourite, the fishing trawler. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to attack, but it's how the planes on offer impact that method of attack, sometimes for the better or worse. For instance, torpedo bombers are slow, requiring extremely low altitudes in order to drop their bomb loads, making them incredibly vulnerable to enemy fighters and flak. There are missions where you must face wave upon wave of enemy bombers and escort planes, but the monotony of having to repeat the same process of shooting down aircraft is always broken down into sections that require you to stay focused, like having to juggle multiple enemy positions at once whilst defending an area or incoming plane, changing location entirely to a new part of the map, and constantly having to switch between aerial and ground combat at the flip of a coin. For me personally, those missions that just have you facing wave upon wave of bombers are easily my favourite because their simplicity helps to break up the PTSD of having to go through that goddamn recon mission again.
Oh, boys, you're gonna love that.
Damage and particles. The variety in all types of damage, whether that be to a plane or ground target, is definitely something that should be commended in this game. It's these kinds of details that really show how the developers put every ounce of real-world care into the final product. Regardless of whether it's a quick-fire burst or a rocket-propelled death charge, the release, so when you shoot your gun or weapon, the impact, so when it hits the target, and the recognition from the game that the target was indeed hit, all are in perfect harmony together here. The gunplay, while being arcadey, offers up so many satisfying moments. The variety of machine guns on offer, combined with the variety of ways enemy planes can be destroyed, makes for the most satisfying shooting that I've ever done in a virtual aircraft. The smoke trails, the colour change, and placement of those particles on the plane, whether that be in the cockpit or the engine, thinking to yourself you might not be able to make it back to base with the tiniest slither of health remaining as your plane grunts and moans at the increase in throttle, it all combines into this perfect frantic scenario that keeps me playing. Alright, so we've made it this far into the video, it's only fair that I finally talk about those goddamn beautiful planes once and for all. I give you
Crap. We're blocked in behind those damn bombers. Crow, get your squadron up. Clear that runway now!
Before I can get into the murky depths of the available planes on offer, I must make reference to the game engine and surrounding details regarding the world of Heroes. The fact that to this day this game still amazes me at how much it can carry. I am of course referring to how many planes can be on screen at any given time. There are hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of planes flying around the skies of this game, creating some of the most insane moments on a freaking PS2 of all machines. Obviously the Marianas Turkey Shoot stands out as the big one, but there are also several battles in this campaign that require you to destroy 100 enemy planes in a single mission. Sometimes the screen becomes so filled with planes that you don't even need to aim, just remain level and shoot. And that's not even touching on how filled with detail the terrain and landscapes are, whether it be foliage, set dressing of trees and shrubs, or full military complexes both Allied and Japanese. The eye for detail here is what makes everything so believable and replayable. I still remember the first time I laid eyes on the infantry soldiers, realizing that they are just 2D sprites, but loving the fact that details that small actually exist in this game world. While you're busy trying to spot the map details while whizzing around at 500 miles an hour, you'll notice that objectives are very easy to understand. As we mentioned earlier, they'll normally involve you shooting at something, but the way that the HUD highlights this is a very neat yet simple touch. Objectives are simple. Items highlighted in yellow are primary, while items highlighted in orange are secondary. Fulfilling objectives gives you upgrade points, which in turn you can use upgrades to upgrade your whip into something
a little bit spicy.
So, when we consider how there are only 36 usable planes in the entire game, those that offer up an upgrade is where the replayability kicks in, because each upgrade brings with it better stats and a different paint job, which for me is always an added bonus when knowing the historical significance of these aircraft. The Pacific Theatre is where my love lies in World War II, the planes especially, but equally the fascination with how Japan has changed so much over the last 80 years, going from a militaristic, totalitarian state through to how we view this nation today. Anyhow, starting with the first group of available aircraft, here's my list of the top 10 rankings for fighter planes in Heroes of the Pacific. Please note that this is my own personal list, but feel free to leave your top 10 ranking in the comments below. First up we have the Focke-Wulf FW-190, A8 to be specific. The guns alone are what give it this spot. While the armour is mid-tier at best, the lack of speed and agility is where the Focke-Wulf only scrapes in at number 10. The Corsair FYU-4, ye old faithful during the early parts of the campaign when you have barely unlocked any planes. The Corsair provides strong armour and decent agility, which helps make up for the lack of strong guns. Much like the Focke-Wulf, the Corsair's unmistakable silhouette and design is what also adds to its speed and charm, a welcome spot at number 9. At number 8 we have a tough little SOB. The J2M7 Raiden Jack is one of the most agile fighters in the entire game. You'll be able to use this plane by default on the mission and steal the prototype, but like all other Japanese planes, you'll have to wait until you've completed the campaign once to use in full time. The main downside to the Raiden is its smaller gun size, only holding 4 R4M rockets and ×2 500-pound bombs. Following closely at number 7 is the KI-841C version of the Hayata Ace Frank fighter, a plane that could quite easily outmaneuver the American Mustang, with its introduction into the war occurring quite late on in 1944. The obvious advantage here are the Frank's speed and agility, with the armour and guns offering up decent quantities of both rockets and bombs. Though she handles very nicely in game, I couldn't help but feel biased for number 6, as we see the P-51 Mustang. Its iconic design is purely the reason for it sitting above the Frank for me, as in game I do much prefer the slightly more nimble Ace. Boasting slightly higher armour, the Mustang offers up the same quantity of weapons as the Frank, with the Mustang first being introduced to the war effort in 1942. You'll do just fine in dogfights with this plane, but remember that should you go charging into a herd of Betty bombers, you better buckle up and find an exit point fast, otherwise you'll be turned into Swiss cheese faster than you can fly away. Smoke away! At the midway point we see the deadliest and equally most iconic Japanese fighter of World War II, the A6M0. She takes the number 5 spot for 2 reasons. Number 1, because she's the most agile plane in the entire game, and number 2, because she is one of my favourite planes of the entire war. Now it should be noted that the Zero should not be used for any kind of ground attack. This plane is purely for dogfighting and taking on enemy bombers, but be warned, the low armour is the Zero's ultimate cost for having such high agility. In fact, I wouldn't really see this aircraft as being a pick for me in the later stages of the campaign, not unless I wanted to play with a handicap of being torn to pieces in an instant. Still, you'll be seeing plenty of this plane coming at you throughout Heroes of the Pacific. The last thing you want on your tail is a nest full of zeros though. At number 4 we have a plane that is only unlockable via the Ace difficulty, the P-61 Black Widow. What this plane lacks in speed and agility, it more than makes up for in armor and guns. The additional belly cannon and high quantity of bombs makes it a must-pick for any mission requiring contact with ground or seafaring targets. She can go toe-to-toe with any plane in a dogfight, however don't forget that you are missing any form of rocket projectiles here, so do bear that in mind when going one-to-one head first. The lack of agility is the only reason this plane isn't in the top 3. As for my own playstyle, I much prefer more nimble aircraft, but this is easily the number 1 pick for going after ground targets. Unlocked after completing the final mission, the J-7W Shinden fighter never actually made its official introduction into the war, with only 2 prototypes being built, the first being flown in August 1945. She was meant to be an intercept fighter, created in response to the B-29 raids on the Japanese home islands, but even with a jet engine powered version being considered, she was too little too late for the Japanese. In-game, the Shinden offers up equal parts speed, agility and guns, with the higher 30mm cannon being the trade-off for the slightly lower rocket quantity of 6 compared to the 8 of some of the American fighters. Despite the mid-level armor rating, the Shinden's unique backwards design and solid efficiency is what places it in the top 3 here. A direct upgrade from the P-38 Lightning, the F-6F Hellcat easily takes the number 2 spot. With an incredibly high amount of armor, the Hellcat actually ended the war with an unbeatable 19-to-1 kill ratio. Being able to hold your own in any dogfight is key to winning in this game, and ultimately that's what the Hellcat brings to the table. While the speed, agility and guns are all round mid-level, you certainly won't be complaining when you are being shot up from all sides, but your plane is still standing by the end of it. The F-6F is going to be the number 1 choice, that is until the next and final plane comes along. And so the top spot here has to go to the F-8F Bearcat. Much like the Lightning to the Hellcat, the Bearcat was actually the successor to the Hellcat. However, much like the Japanese Shinden fighter, its production came too late into the war, so the Bearcat never actually saw wartime service, at least not for World War II. Nevertheless, in Heroes of the Pacific, this aircraft boasts some of the equally highest stats. Armoured with 4 20mm cannons, 6 5-inch rockets and 2,000-pound bombs, this nosy little fighter was quick, agile and strong, and is easily my top pick among all the fighters in the entire game. The Bearcat becomes available during your first playthrough of the campaign, but I can certainly bet it won't be the last time you'll be using it for sure.
All wings form up, move it ladies! The Biggie is waiting for us to pull her ass out of the fire. Crow, did you hear me? Or are you bucking for a transfer to Alaska? Now they could use a man of your skills there, I'm sure.
No thanks, sir. I like the South Sea weather.
As for the rest of the fighters that didn't make it into the top 10, the Warhawk is fine for the very first handful of missions of your very first playthrough. After that though, she ain't much use, but all things considered, it does have decent agility. I can say pretty much exactly the same thing for the Wildcat but for armor. Meanwhile, the P-38 Lightning is a good fighter, especially again within your first playthrough, but personally I've never found it as appealing as some of the other fighters. The Seafire, which again is only available in the Ace difficulty to be unlocked, is basically a Bearcat but missing part of the bite. The lower speed, agility and armor will always make it second choice at best. The Yak is Soviet for "we have Bearcat at home," only the cat in question is missing 1 eye and 2 legs. Meanwhile, the Thunderbolt, while being a pretty plane, is very much like the P-38 minus the large rocket capacity. The Tempest is basically the Thunderbolt but with the higher stats on guns rather than armor. The American P-80 Shooting Star and German Me-262 offer up a shit ton of speed and not really much else. Even with the superior 262 guns, you won't be lasting long in the air. The Pete is... Pete. The A6M20 Roof is just an instant nope, while the Tony and Randy fight it out as 2 of my least used fighters in the whole game. As for the P21502, we don't talk about the P21502.
This is Slater. We're in some serious snake food
So with the fighters out the way, let's take a gander at the dive bombers. What's that? There's only 3 of them? I bet they're awesome! Val. Using a Val can only be compared to a frontal lobotomy. With a half-star's worth of armor, it is easily the worst plane to use in the entire game, but equally the most fun to shoot down. Elsewhere we have the D4Y4 Judy, whose stats are an improvement to the Val, but hold nothing to the only dive bomber you should be using in this game, the SBD Dauntless. Boasting some actual armor, it's the go-to for every mission that you are forced into dive bombing enemy destroyers and carriers.
First of all, torpedoes need to be dropped from way down low. You need to get right down to the deck. You have to slow right down, or the torp will skip off the water at any old angle. Of course, normally it's a lot harder than this to hit a moving target, but you should have no problems with hitting this one.
Then we have the torpedo bombers. The B5N Kate and B6N Jill are nothing really to talk about, and I hate to say it, but I'm still TBD on whether or not I actually like the Devastator, but generally speaking, the stats are nothing to shout about. Yep, once again we see yet another American bomber take the first place podium here, and that is the TBM Avenger. I mean, we can all agree that the stats are terrible across the board, but the Avenger is the best of a bad bunch. Plus, you have the added bonus of actually holding rockets too.
The bigger they come, the harder they fall.
And of course, lastly, we have the big bombers of the skies, the bombers. The H-8K Emily is basically the Japanese equivalent of the Catalina, only with a slightly faster rate of speed. Both bombers hold optional torpedo or bomb ordnance, with their armor stats of course being maxed out. The B-26 Marauder is sadly only one you'll be seeing in a single mission, in that of Tokyo Express, as is equally the armament stats of the Catalina and Emily, but generally being a faster aircraft that is capable of warp speed. Meanwhile, the B-25 Mitchell will also only be seen on a single campaign mission, just to famously smoke away those fortified guns on Iwo Jima. The armor and guns are very impressive, compensating heavily for the lack of speed and agility. Saving my favourite meal till last is the G4M Betty bomb. Featuring heavily throughout the campaign as an enemy plane to shoot down, the Betty is to me equally as iconic to the Pacific campaign as the Zero is to fighter planes.
After 2 weeks of clockwork bombing raids and landings, the Japs took wake. Our servicemen fought long and hard. Even the civvies pitched in. I guess they were all hoping that the Enterprise would show up to help. In the end, though, the Japs prevailed, and the commander of Wake surrendered on the 23rd of December. Those Marines on Wake Island were outnumbered, but never outfought.
Now, if none of the previous information has stuck with you until now, then this next part just might. I mean, how could I go through the entire game and not give a mention to its soundtrack? In fact, I don't think I'd be mistaken in saying that if it wasn't for the masterful art of this soundtrack, the game wouldn't have had as much of an impact on me as it did. The high use of brass instruments really emphasizes and in some case complements the planes themselves. Take for instance the 2 tracks titled 01 and 02. Notice here that these 2 different pieces of music create the same theme for this deadly fighter plane. these themes of calm and frantic, the clashing together of that mix so perfectly for this game's genre and setting. Dogfighting flows in exactly the same way, periods of lull, quiet but concentrated silence, suddenly changing at the drop of a hat to become this chaotic mess of survival. What I love most about the music here though is how that drama of battle is neatly balanced in places with tracks that fit those calming moments. Take for instance Mission Track 1, the tune that perfectly summarizes the big, clunky nature of the Catalina. The part that impresses me most though was how these tracks were specifically designed to be used at certain points during any given campaign mission, with the quiet parts matching the calm music and that flowing into the next track without hesitation, just as you do when you dive in on a group of unsuspecting bombers. My favourite track though, out of all of them, is simply called Submenu 7. In this track you get this immediate sense of something big, lumberous and heavy. Could be a plane, could be a battleship. Either way, it's barreling down on you from a distance, and at the crescendo, as the brass hits that high note, you see this enormous beast appear in full view from behind the nearby hillside. The soundtrack for Heroes of the Pacific achieves exactly the same thing as some of the other top dogfighting games in the genre. Like Ace Combat, the music perfectly captures the scene, symbolizing the very content that you are both seeing and flying.
What are those Zeros doing? They're acting weird. Kamikaze! God damn, I don't know if those bastards are incredibly brave or just plain damn crazy.
If you thought the joys of this game end with the campaign mode, then think again. As well as being able to individually select all the previously played missions, you'll also be able to find instant action, a quick little mode that throws you into the heat of battle and is generally a solid mode for testing out all the planes that you previously hadn't had time for during the campaign. The location and general game settings can be adjusted, including the enemy's skill level, their respawn speed, time limit, kill limit, and health regen. As you'd expect, you are pitted against wave upon wave of AI enemies, and by the end of it you'll be haunted by the inevitable words of
We have an unknown radar contact to the south. We've got an incoming from the north. Contact. We have an unknown radar contact to the south. We've got an incoming from the north. Contact to the west. We've got an incoming from the southeast. Get back to the combat zone.
If you're after more single-player content, then the next place you ought to be looking is in the historical section. Here you'll be finding 5 individual missions that all center around a real-life pilot or scenario within the Pacific Theater. Mission 1, Against All Odds, sees you take charge of Lieutenant Edward Henry O'Hare, nicknamed Thatch in game, who won the Medal of Honor on the 20th of February 1942 for single-handedly defending the USS Lexington after shooting down 5 of the 9 attacking Japanese Betty bombers with his F-4F Wildcat, and so you must do the same here. Mission 2's Flight of the Avengers sees you take that first flight into the Battle of Midway, where you'll be putting your torpedo skills to the test in the hopes of sinking the aircraft carrier Akagi.
Get us out of here!
Mission 3's Chain Lightning sees you take control of Major John Mitchell, armed with a squadron of 18 P-38 Lightnings. It's up to you to locate and take out the escaping Admiral Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, by far my favourite, and for the reason many veteran players of this game will expect, Mission 4's Zeros over Rabaul has you lead the charge on an ambush against a squadron of American Lightnings at the hands of Imperial Japanese ace Tetsuzo Iwamoto.
ゼロ戦どうぞアメリカ隊の視野の外から忍び寄ることができるぞ下方背後から入れ攻撃せよ奴らに劣勢の時でも恐れがなさい後ろを示してやれ臆病者が逃げていけるぞ情けは無用最低でも6キロ撃退する必要があるそれで奴らが空にから戻ってくるのを愚かすことができるぞ
This is the only mission in the entire game where you get to play as a Japanese pilot, as it's worth noting here that not only do you get the full Japanese dialogue, but that dialogue is also integrated into the squadron command calls as well, which is a really neat touch.
危ない司令官アメリカ人が背後にいます変態やめこのエリアを防護中攻撃されていますわかりました
This mission makes me long for a Japanese campaign in its own right. Even when you know that the outcome is going to be bad, seeing it from the losing side is always an interesting endeavor.
思い知ったかアメリカ人よラバーからさ素晴らしい戦果だ将軍我々のことを話せるアメリカ人は一人も生き残らなかった天皇陛下は今日の我々の動きを誇りように思われるだろう万歳万歳万歳
And Mission 5's escape over Rabaul puts you in charge of Ike Kepford, who, alone in his Corsair, manages to stir up a hornet's nest of Zeros after he takes out a lone roof fighter.
Oh hell, now I'm in for it. Better run.
Facing odds of 3 to 1, you can either be a coward and run away and achieve the mission without even firing a shot, or choose to stand and fight like a psychopath because ace difficulty runs in your bloodstream and there ain't no turning back now. In all seriousness though, this is the toughest mission of the lot, purely because, well, just look at this. And so, my dear compatriots, we come to the hidden gem among all game modes in Heroes of the Pacific, multiplayer. Now, back in the day, me and my younger brother would duel it out on the split-screen deathmatch, which was pretty sick, and it's no question here, though, that the online mode is
fucking dead.
Don't worry though, guys, it's powered by GameSpy. Holy shit, that takes me back. Alright, so if online is off the table, then we still have LAN, and with LAN comes more offline content. See, I don't know if at the time of playing the hell out of the PS2 version as a kid, that I just completely missed the other multiplayer game modes, but here in the year 2024, on the PC version, we have got a whole lot of additional things to try out, my friend. Not only can you give yourself a sweet name, but when setting up the LAN party, we get to choose from 5 goddamn different game modes, people. This is insane. You got your regular deathmatch, it's alright. Planes shoot planes, no big deal. Wait, what's this? Hello? Not only did the developers give us other game modes, but they also added in funky balloons that you can shoot down to give yourself funky boosts, but not always for the better.
Hell and damnation, that thing's enormous.
You've also got your team deathmatch, because I hate to say it, but boys, we're alone out here. And the only way to make the most of this content is by working with the AI, not entirely against it. Capture the Flag sees you automatically divided into 2 teams, requiring you to fly low over the enemy carrier in order to collect the flag, after which your speed is reduced and you can't warp either, you're screwed. You then have to shoot any of the nearby balloons in order to then continue on to your next carrier, which is your own, where you can deliver the intel. The balloon shooting here is weird, but I guess it gives you another task to do while you're on the way to the carrier. Then we have Fox and Hound, an initially confusing game mode that sees a free-for-all on who can stay alive the longest kind of gameplay. The pilot designated as the Fox receives a permanent reduction in speed and must continue to shoot down balloons in order to gain the pickup power and stay alive the longest, while the others are the Hounds, whose job it is to shoot you down. Whoever deals the most damage becomes the Fox, with the previous Fox then becoming a Hound. It's a weird one because I actually found myself just shooting down the other players rather than the balloons, but hey, at least you get some sweet purple trails when you are the Fox. And finally we have another favourite of mine, Scratch One Flat Top. This game mode provides you with the best of everything, being able to pit 2 teams of 4 against each other with the ultimate goal of sinking the other team's carrier. Only trouble is, these ships here have a ton of health, so I'd advise setting the time limit to be at least 10 minutes to make it feel somewhat possible to actually sink the goddamn ship. But the best part about this mode by far is the ability to switch between planes during play. It's definitely helped to vary up things and overall provide you with a more unique sandbox to play around with, especially when it comes to, again, aircraft that you normally wouldn't use. Generally, the AI are fairly quiet in this mode compared to the likes of Deathmatch and Capture the Flag, so you can sort of comfortably choose to either stay and defend your own carrier or go all-out offensive without the overwhelming fear of being shot to pieces, at least not by the enemy planes anyway.
I'm hit. Control wires dropped to hell. No stick response. I'll have to ride this bitch in. Eat this, Tojo.
Ox! Oh, hell, he didn't make it.
Poor bastard.
The immersion within Heroes of the Pacific can be taken one step further via the in-game controls. By default, you'll have the less detailed approach of arcade mode, which allows you to maintain simple controls over the aircraft, while professional controls move the plane as it would in real life, and generally it becomes much harder to keep the enemy in your sights and keep him there. Within the arcade controls on the PS2 version, you'll be using the left analog stick to control direction, while the right analog stick would allow you to then roll the plane. But for some reason on the PC version, I'm unable to add the right stick within the controls input menu, which is a little annoying. If you are looking to play Heroes in 2024, there are multiple ways that you can do this. The most obvious one for those with original hardware is to buy the game for PS2. You can get it for dirt cheap online, but if you're like me who primarily wants to play on PC, then I'd advise that you either use a PS2 emulator like RetroArch, or you can buy a copy of the PC version like I did, and then look to acquire a no CD exe file to replace it with after installing via the CD itself. Modern hardware will more than likely prevent you from installing directly from the CD and being able to play straight away, but once you switched your exe file and made sure to run the exe in compatibility mode, you should finally be able to take to the skies.
You better shut him up before he lets the cat out of the bag.
He said it! He said it!
Heroes of the Pacific remains as one of my favourite games of all time. It drove my fascination with the battles, planes and individuals of the Pacific campaign from all sides of the conflict, and when compared to modern dogfighting games today, it still holds its own within this genre. In 2009, Transmission Games and their publisher Ubisoft once again released what was technically a sequel to Heroes of the Pacific in Heroes Over Europe, and that was brought out on PC, Xbox 360 and PS3, scoring mid-reviews at the time. Having played through the entirety of its campaign, I have to say that Heroes Over Europe does have some highlights in the planes and the scenery. It even tries to go one step further with introducing a new ace kill. Oh god, he's dead. Yeah, they introduced this new ace kill game mechanic where you were able to slow down time and effectively snipe any part of the targeted plane, which I wasn't really a fan of. What I can say is that they definitely tried with this game, but ultimately for me, it will never outshine the original. From the way that you move and can view your plane from a number of different camera angles in the air, to the fact that your entire playthrough is recorded and can be viewed back to you within a replay mode, Heroes of the Pacific is a legendary dogfighting masterpiece. Sure, it's incredibly corny at times.
Thank our lucky stars that you were on the ball, Crow. Fleet will give you a commendation for this. You saved their ass for sure.
But its gameplay and eye for detail are what make it one of the greats, and if you haven't played it yet, then I highly recommend that you do. Of course, what I want to know from the veterans of this game is what is your favorite mission and plane? Let me know everything that you have to say in the comments below. Of course, for most of my regular audience, this is a change in video topic to the usual Hogs of War coverage, but do not worry, as we'll be returning to regular scheduled programming very soon. In the meantime though, I do intend to make future Heroes of the Pacific videos that are a little bit shorter and a bit more specific on topic that will be posted either here on the main channel or over on the second channel, which is titled Pinstripe Plays. It's pretty lame, but you'll find more varied content over there when I can be bothered to upload it. Don't forget there is also a voice acting channel where I post my most up-to-date audio for both casual and professional work, so feel free to check out both of those as they'll be linked at the end of this video. For now though, you should go and play Heroes of the Pacific, and I will catch you guys later for the next one.
Pretty soon we shipped out for home. It was the longest trip I'd ever taken, but I'll never forget seeing the US soil again. Mom looked tired, but boy was I glad to see her. First thing we did was catch a train to Washington, D.C. to see where Charlie and Dad were buried. I still see Callahan and the rest of the boys every year. We have a drink and salute the thousands of men who are the real heroes of the Pacific.